What if one sentence, quietly buried in a forgotten gospel, held the key to your true origin? Not your birthplace, not your family line, but where your consciousness itself comes from. In the Gospel of Thomas, saying 50, Jesus delivers a cryptic instruction to his inner circle. He doesn't preach morality. He doesn't offer comfort. Instead, he gives them a code, a precise answer to a future interrogation. If they say to you, "Where did you come from?" say to them, "We came from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself." This is not poetry. This is not metaphor, at least not in the way we've been taught to think. It is a declaration of identity. For centuries, this saying was ignored, suppressed, or dismissed as mystical excess, too dangerous, too empowering, too direct. Because embedded in these words is a radical idea, that the human being is not a fallen creature crawling toward salvation, but a luminous consciousness that forgot where it came from. Tonight, we revisit saying 50, not as a relic of early Christianity, but as a living transmission. We will explore why the phrase, "You are from the light," was never meant to be inspirational language, why it functions more like a password than a belief, why ancient initiates across Egypt, Persia, and the Mediterranean shared the same origin story, coded differently, but pointing to the same source. And most importantly, we will uncover what happens when this saying is no longer read about you, but spoken from you. Because this teaching was not designed for crowds. It was designed for moments of confrontation, when the world asks you to define yourself, when systems of power demand an answer, when reality itself presses the question, who are you, really? By the end of this journey, you may begin to sense why this knowledge was hidden in plain sight, why remembering your origin is not a comfort, but a responsibility, and why the light spoken of in Thomas is not somewhere above you, beyond you, or after death, but something that recognizes itself through you. This is not theology. This is remembrance. And once remembered, it changes everything. To understand the true gravity of saying 50, we must step outside the polished halls of institutional religion and walk back into a far older, stranger world. A world where spiritual knowledge was not taught openly, but initiated. A world where truth was layered, symbolic, and often dangerous to possess. The Gospel of Thomas itself was lost for over 16 centuries. Discovered in 1945 among the Nag Hammadi texts in Egypt, it was not bound with the familiar narratives of miracles, crucifixion, or resurrection. Instead, Thomas is a collection of sayings, raw, sharp, and often unsettling. No storyline, no theology, just fragments of knowledge, spoken as if the listener already knows something and must remember the rest. This alone tells us something crucial. Thomas was never meant for the masses. Early church authorities rejected it, not because it contradicted Jesus, but because it bypassed them. There is no priesthood in Thomas, no intermediary. Salvation is not granted through belief, obedience, or ritual. It emerges through gnosis, direct knowing. And saying 50 is among the most explicit expressions of this idea. The language of light was not unique to Christianity. Long before Jesus, Egyptian initiates spoke of the Akh, the luminous, transfigured essence of the soul. In Zoroastrian Persia, light was the primal substance of consciousness, opposed not by evil, but by ignorance. Plato described the soul descending from the realm of pure forms into the shadows of matter, forgetting its origin. And in Hermetic texts, humanity is described as divine light trapped in density, tasked with awakening itself. These traditions all agree on one thing. The human being originates from a luminous source and enters the world through a kind of cosmic amnesia. Saying 50 fits perfectly into this lineage. When Jesus says, "We came from the light," from the place where the light came into being by itself, he is not describing creation in time. He is describing emanation, a timeless unfolding. Light giving birth to itself, not through force, but through recognition. This mirrors Neoplatonic philosophy, where the one radiates existence without diminishing itself. The light does not lose power by expressing, it multiplies. But here is where Thomas becomes truly subversive. The saying continues by instructing the disciple on how to respond when questioned, by authority. If they ask you, "What is the sign of your Father in you?" say to them, "It is movement and rest." Movement and rest, becoming and being, form and stillness. This is not religious language, it is metaphysical language. In ancient mystery schools, such phrases were used as markers. If you understood them, you belonged inside the circle. If you didn't, the words sounded vague, even meaningless. This is why such teachings survived persecution. They were invisible to the uninitiated. Over time, however, Christianity shifted. The emphasis moved from inner light to external authority, from direct knowing to correct belief. The kingdom of heaven, once described as within, was relocated to the afterlife. Light became something you worshipped, not something you embodied. Saying 50 threatens this entire structure, because if your origin is the light, then no institution owns your salvation, and no system can define your worth. This is why the saying was buried, and why it still waits for those ready to remember. At first glance, saying 50 appears simple, almost too simple, a scripted response, a prepared answer. But ancient wisdom is rarely concerned with what is said. It is concerned with who is capable of saying it, truthfully. This is where the real meaning begins to unfold. When Jesus instructs the disciples to say, "We came from the light," he is not asking them to adopt a belief. In the ancient world, to speak an origin was to activate it. Names, words, and declarations were understood as performative acts. To speak falsely was not immoral. It was ineffective. The words simply wouldn't work. This transforms the saying into something radical, a diagnostic tool. If you can say, "I am from the light," and it remains an idea, nothing happens. But if the statement resonates, if something in you recognizes it, then the words are not learned. They are remembered. Ancient initiatory traditions operated on this principle. Knowledge was not given, it was triggered. Like striking a tuning fork near a hidden instrument, the correct phrase caused the soul to vibrate in recognition. This is why the saying is framed as a response to interrogation. If they say to you, not if you wonder, not if you believe, but if you are challenged. The world questions identity constantly. It demands labels, profession, nationality, belief system, status. Saying 50 presents an entirely different axis of identity. Not social, not psychological, but ontological. It answers the question of what you are before you became someone. The phrase, "the place where the light came into being by itself," is especially revealing. This is not a location in space. It is a state of self-originating awareness, consciousness before division, light that does not need an external source. In modern language, we might call this pure awareness, consciousness aware of itself. This reframes creation entirely. Instead of a distant God creating humans as separate beings, this teaching suggests that humans are localized expressions of an infinite luminous field. The light does not send you. It extends itself as you. But here's the paradox. If that were obvious, there would be no need for the saying. Which brings us to the forgetting. According to Gnostic cosmology, the descent into material existence involved fragmentation, not punishment, distraction. Attention moved outward. Identity crystallized around form, story, and survival. The light became veiled, not destroyed. Saying 50 is designed to pierce that veil. Notice the structure: origin, self-creation, recognition, and embodiment. The disciple doesn't say, God is light. He says we came from the light. Collective, not individual. This implies a shared source, a unified field, expressing as many. And then comes the most overlooked line. It established itself and became manifest through their image. Image here does not mean appearance. It means reflection. You are not the light's product. You are its mirror. This is why the saying is dangerous, because mirrors don't obey. They reflect what is present. When consciousness recognizes itself, it no longer seeks permission. But this recognition is not intellectual. And this is where many interpretations fail. The ancient mind understood that truth unfolds in stages. First comes hearing, then contemplation, then embodiment. The saying only completes itself in the third stage, when your sense of self subtly shifts from I have consciousness to I am consciousness, temporarily shaped. And once that shift begins, the question changes. You no longer ask, am I from the light? You begin to ask, what blocks my remembering? That is where the deeper work begins. Now we arrive at the most enigmatic and perhaps the most powerful line in saying 50. If they say to you, what is the sign of your Father in you? Say to them, it is movement and rest. At first, this sounds almost evasive. How can a divine sign be both movement and rest? Isn't that a contradiction? To the modern mind, yes. To the ancient initiates, it was a precision instrument. This phrase encodes a paradox that can only be understood through direct experience. In esoteric traditions, paradox is not confusion. It is a gateway. When the intellect fails to resolve a statement, awareness is forced to drop deeper. Movement and rest describe the two fundamental modes of consciousness. Movement is thought, emotion, sensation, action, the constant flow of becoming. Rest is the silent background that never changes, the witness, the still point, the unshaken presence behind experience. Most people live entirely in movement. Their identity is fused with thoughts, memories, roles, and reactions. They are the current, unaware of the riverbed beneath it. Saying 50 points to the realization that the light expresses itself as both. You are the movement, your personality, your life story, your choices unfolding in time. But you are also the rest, the unmoving awareness in which all of that appears. This is the sign of the Father in you. Not miracles, not authority, not moral perfection. Presence. This aligns with teachings found in Advaita Vedanta, Zen Buddhism, and later Christian mysticism, though often stripped of its radical implications. Meister Eckhart, centuries later, would echo this insight when he said, "The eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me." But Thomas says it earlier, and more dangerously. Because if the divine sign is internal, then external validation becomes irrelevant. Here is where misconceptions arise. Many assume light refers to goodness, positivity, or moral purity. But ancient light is not ethical. It is ontological. It is the raw fact of awareness. Light illuminates everything, including what we call dark. To reject parts of experience is to misunderstand the light's function. This is why spiritual bypassing, using light language to avoid pain, shadow, or responsibility, was never part of the original teaching. True remembrance includes the totality of experience, without fragmentation. Movement without rest leads to chaos. Rest without movement leads to stagnation. Awakening is not escaping life. It is inhabiting it from a deeper center. There is another hidden layer here. In ancient cosmology, rulers, archons, were said to govern the world of form through rigid structures: law, fear, identity, time. Movement alone is predictable. It can be controlled. Rest alone is invisible, unreachable. But one who embodies both becomes elusive. They act in the world, yet are not defined by it. They participate without attachment. They move, but they are not pushed. This is why such individuals were seen as dangerous, not because they rebelled, but because they could not be owned. When saying 50 prepares the disciple to answer interrogation, it is not hypothetical. It reflects an ancient understanding. Systems of power challenge those who no longer derive identity from them. The true initiate does not argue. They do not defend. They simply state their origin. And in doing so, something subtle occurs. The questioner senses it, not intellectually, but energetically. The light recognizes itself. This is why the saying ends not with doctrine, but with being. To say, "I am from the light," is not to claim superiority. It is to dissolve false hierarchy altogether. Light does not dominate, it reveals. And once you glimpse this, another realization follows. You don't need to become luminous. You need to stop obscuring what already is. Which brings us, finally, to the practical question. How does one live as a being of light, without illusion, without escape, and without losing their humanity? That is where application begins. Practical application. Remembering the light in daily life. Ancient wisdom only survives when it can be lived. Saying 50 was never meant to remain a beautiful idea or a mystical curiosity. It was designed to reorient consciousness. So the question now becomes practical and unavoidable. How do you live as someone who remembers they are from the light, while still moving through a dense, demanding world? The first step is subtle, and this is why it is often overlooked. Begin by observing where your identity habitually settles. Most of us unconsciously anchor our sense of self in movement alone. Thoughts, emotions, reactions, narratives. We wake up already inside the current. The practice is not to stop the river, but to notice the riverbed. Once a day, preferably in silence, pause and ask not, "What am I thinking?" but, "What is aware of this thinking?" Do not search for an answer in words. Let attention gently turn back on itself. Even a few seconds of this reorientation creates a fissure in the old pattern. This is rest. Over time, you will notice something profound. Rest does not oppose action. It clarifies it. Decisions emerge with less friction. Emotional reactions soften. You are still engaged, but no longer consumed. This is movement infused with light. A second practice involves speech, because saying 50 itself is spoken knowledge. Ancient traditions understood that words shape perception. Begin to notice how often you define yourself through limitation. I am anxious. I am behind. I am not ready. These are not descriptions. They are identifications. Experiment with a quiet inner correction. Not affirmation, but orientation. Instead of, "I am anxious," sense into, "Anxiety is moving through awareness." Instead of, "I am lost," try, "Uncertainty is present, and I am aware of it." This small linguistic shift reclaims rest without denying movement. You are no longer trapped in the experience. You are hosting it. Third, and most challenging, is shadow integration. Remember, light illuminates everything. If your spirituality avoids grief, anger, fear, or desire, it is incomplete. When difficult emotions arise, resist the urge to rise above them. Stay present. Let awareness remain open and steady. This is the light doing its real work, revealing, not suppressing. In ancient terms, this is how fragmentation heals. There is also a relational application. When you interact with others, notice how identity contracts, roles solidify, defenses rise. Practice sensing the same awareness, looking through their eyes that looks through yours. You don't need to say this. You don't need to believe it conceptually. Simply notice what happens to conflict when you hold this perception. Often, it dissolves without effort. Finally, remember this. Living as light does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You say no when needed. You act decisively when clarity arises. But your actions are no longer fueled by fear of survival or hunger for validation. You move, but you are not restless. You rest, but you are not withdrawn. This balance is rare, and that is why it is transformative. The world does not need more beliefs. It needs people who remember where they come from and live accordingly. Which brings us to the final question, the one saying 50 quietly leaves behind. If you are from the light, what kind of presence does that ask you to become? Saying 50 does not end with comfort. It ends with implication. To remember that you are from the light is not a spiritual achievement. It is a turning point. Once seen, it cannot be unseen. And this is why such knowledge was never spread carelessly. Not everyone wants the responsibility that comes with remembering their origin. Because if you are from the light, then ignorance is no longer innocence. If you are from the light, then unconscious living becomes a choice. And if you are from the light, then every moment asks something of you. Not perfection, but presence. We've traced this saying from its hidden history to its inner mechanics, from ancient initiation to modern application. And what emerges is not a belief system, but a quiet challenge. The world will continue to ask you who you are, through pressure, through fear, through distraction, through crisis. Most answers will be accepted. Only one will transform you. Not spoken aloud, but lived. The light does not demand worship. It asks for clarity. It does not seek followers. It seeks mirrors. And when awareness recognizes itself within form, something ancient re-enters the world, not as doctrine, but as demeanor. Calm where there was reactivity, discernment where there was confusion, compassion without collapse, strength without domination. This is what it means to bear the sign of the Father within. Not movement alone, not rest alone, but the living harmony of both. Perhaps this is why the saying was framed as a response to interrogation, because life will test this knowing. It will challenge your identity again and again, and each time you will be invited to answer, not with words, but with how you stand, how you act, how you see. So the question remains, not as theology, but as lived inquiry. When the world asks where you come from, will your life remember the answer? If this exploration stirred something in you, let it deepen. Sit with it. Return to the saying. Watch how it unfolds differently as you do. And if you feel called, share this reflection with others who sense there is more beneath the surface of familiar words. Because some teachings don't arrive to inform, they arrive to awaken. And the light, once remembered, does not fade. It recognizes itself again and again through you.